My hair. Hi guys, welcome to Real Life Cooking with Chefleen. Let's see, I have another new technological guru. So we're gonna make sure all these things are working first. Do you see it on there? It might not because I'm... Anyone here? Oh, hi, Aunt Maureen. How are you? We have one. It's not on Instagram yet, but you gotta find it on Facebook. How is Washington? How's the weather? Is it nice and fall-like? Old folks ready at home. You see it? All right, sign out and sign in with me. Or sign in with me. Log out, yeah. Just gonna get the kitchen ready. Oh, this is dirty. Why is this here? Oh, it's not. Oops, wrong way. Hurry, hurry. Hey, Instagram. Just getting Instagram ready over here. Let's make sure you have a good view today, because I know last week you guys kind of felt like you had the cheap seats. But welcome to Real Life Cooking. Hi, Drew. Hi, Nikki. Nikki is cooking along today. We have some followers on Instagram now joining on in. Hi, Kiana. Hey, Colleen. What's going on? We're just getting our technological portion together right now, making sure that my new technological guru, Stephanie, can see it on Facebook so she can answer your questions live if you have any questions.
Got it.
We're all good? Good to go?
Old folks ready at home.
Whole party's here. We have all 7 of us here. Excellent. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna just go to my position back here. Welcome to Real Life Cooking, where we make a meal from start to finish from the comfort of my home or your home if you're cooking along. I really want to inspire you and show you that cooking is super easy from your own home, so that's why I don't have any gimmicks, no TV magic. We literally make the whole meal as we go along. So, are you on Instagram too, Steph?
Yes.
All right. As I mentioned before, we have Stephanie taking care of the ones and twos, technological guru. TT's very sad that she's missing out on steak today, but maybe we'll save you. Probably not. Sorry, TT. Come over another time. We'll make some steak for you. So today we are making filet mignon with sweet potato hash and a cranberry gastrique. If you have seen my promotions that I did for this, I totally spelled 2 different words wrong. Clearly cooking's my specialty, not spelling. Mignon is actually M-I-G-N-O-N, and gastrique is G-A-S-T-R-I-C-I-Q-U-E. Yeah, I told you guys I'm a horrible speller. But needless to say, it's still gonna be delicious no matter how you spell whatever you spell. And it's nice and fall-like, and we're gonna get into how to chop some vegetables as well. So the first thing that we're actually gonna get started with is our sweet potato hash. So I'm gonna bring over all those ingredients, and I'm also gonna turn on my pan, just so it can start heating up back here. Actually, I'm gonna use this burner. This burner is way better. If you are just joining me, you know I have a baby mini oven stove. It looks very beautiful, but there's only one good burner on here, so I want to make sure I'm using the best burner possible. Also, if you are at home and you're cooking along, please turn your oven on to 425 and also get a pot of some simmering water back here. We're going to be blanching some kale later, and we're going to finish our steaks in the oven, so you want to make sure that it's nice and hot when you're ready to put your steaks in. Also, before we start, you want to have your steaks out of the fridge and sitting at room temperature. That's really important. We'll get into why later. But steaks out, oven on, pot of simmering water, and let's go ahead and get started with our hash. So we have our potatoes, onion, orange, celery, and we have our smoked paprika and cayenne pepper, which we're not going to use quite yet. So as promised, we're gonna get into some chopping skills. The first thing that we're gonna do is chop our potatoes. So I was so excited because I went to Whole Foods today and They had purple sweet potatoes actually there, so I just got that. They taste sometimes a little sweeter. They can be a little drier. It's really more for just a visual. It looks really pretty. So if you have the regular ones, totally fine, not a problem. So most people, when they peel things, they use this vegetable peeler, and they peel like this, which is not very effective for something like a sweet potato. You see how difficult this is. I'm making a mess, of course. So instead of wasting my time using this vegetable peeler, I'm just gonna square this off because again, I wanna make really nice knife cuts, and the way that I'm gonna do that is by squaring off my vegetable anyway. So I'm just going to, potatoes are hard, cut off the tops and bottom, and then set it on its side, just like this. And then I'm just going to run my knife down the edge as close as possible so that the peel comes off and I'm not wasting too much of the vegetable. Although I did just say that we're gonna square this off, so this step isn't as important. But squaring off, although it creates really nice knife texture or nice cuts, it wastes a lot of your vegetables. So in a restaurant, you know, when everything's nice and neat, they're actually wasting a lot in the back. Or they're using all of their stuff to put in like stocks or soups or something like that. So we have our sweet potato that we peeled. I'm gonna go ahead, another tip when you're cutting things, is do everything at one time. So if you have 4 potatoes, you wanna peel them all and then do the next part. So I'm gonna peel, so I have my purple potato peeled. I'm gonna go ahead and do my orange potato. Just pull that off, just like this. And as you can see, I'm just running my knife as close to possible to the potato. These actually, you can toss them with some olive oil and put them in the oven at 425. Sprinkle with salt. They taste pretty good for that as well, that application. But today I'm not doing that. All right, so I have my 2 potatoes, and then I asked you to get 1 white potato. Let's go ahead and do the third thing with that. So you see all these beautiful colors we have going into our hash. Very fall-like, yes, as promised. Fall-like chopping and steak. We're not missing out on anything here. Even though I got back from Miami today, so I'm like, I was excited about fall, but now that I've been in Miami, I'm like, I want the sun back. All right, so I have all my potatoes nice and chopped, or nice and peeled. So now what I'm gonna do is do something called squaring off my potato. And I'm only gonna show you one because I don't wanna waste so much potato. I wanna actually eat it. But if you want perfect cuts, this is what you need to do. So squaring off, I'm gonna use the bigger potato just so you can see it better. Squaring off literally means creating a square-like shape with whatever vegetable you're using. So in this case, this is all waste now if I'm squaring off my potato, which obviously if you're cooking at home for yourself and spending ingredients on yourself, you probably don't want to throw all this away because this was a lot of money. It was probably like $50 because I got it at Whole Foods and I wasn't paying attention to the price. All right, so now, oh, I forgot one side. You definitely want to make sure it's as square as possible, which again means all of this waste. And then once you have your square as possible, mine's a little, you gotta lean to the side to see the squareness of it. You're gonna create planks. So what I'm gonna do, and also talking about chopping, when you hold your knife, you do not wanna hold your knife like this, like that. We're not killing anyone, we're just chopping vegetables. You want to put your thumb at this base part of the blade and wrap your hand all the way around the whole knife. And then I'm gonna rock my knife up and down. Yes, question?
We have a question from Gastrique 107. What kind of knife is that?
This is a Victorinox. I've talked about it before. This is one of my, this is like probably my favorite sheet knife. It's about 40 bucks. It's easy to sharpen, and it's pretty durable. The only thing, the biggest difference between this and a really expensive knife is the blade and the handle are not connected as one. And your more expensive knives, they'll all be connected just like that. Actually, this isn't even a good example either. Wow, I don't have a nice expensive knife on my wall. This will be all connected. So the only thing is this could eventually like break off later, but I don't think you're doing that much chopping at home that would be a really big issue. Just turning down my pan. So now I cut my potato into planks. These are about 1/4 of an inch thin. We want to cut them as evenly as possible so they cook at the same rate. And my dad was asking me because he was cooking along today. This dish actually takes pretty short to cook because we're gonna cut our potatoes. Now I have them in these strips. We're gonna cut them into like a small dice. So they're actually gonna cook up very quickly. There's no pre-cooking involved. You can really probably throw this together in about 20 minutes if you're not talking to people on live stream. So there I have my purple potatoes, just like that. I'm going to add some oil to my pan. It doesn't really matter. We're not using super high heat, so you can use the olive oil here, olive oil blend. Question?
It's a little, I don't know if people can see the...
From where?
For Instagram.
Instagram. Can you see?
Can you see?
Let me know. Let Stephanie know. I'm just going to add my purple potatoes to this pan to start them cooking and cut up the rest. Oh, I don't have my bench scraper out today. My favorite tool I was so excited about before. All right, I'll work on my white potato now. I'm not going to square it off this time. I'm just going to cut the planks out of this shape. This potato is a lot softer than my sweet potato.
Oh, I think it's good.
All right, so we have our planks just like that, about the same size. Again, if you're cutting things in your own home, go slow. You're not in a rush, right? You're just making food that tastes good for you. And then with these rounded parts, I'm gonna leave those to the side and cut these planks first. And again, I'm rocking my knife. Instead of just going straight down, I'm rocking my knife. So now I have something that looks like a French fry. This would be called a batonette. It's about 1/4 of an inch in, it's not diameter. What's the word for diameter when it's square? Like a round?
Maybe width?
Yes, the width. And then I'm just gonna chop them into similar sized pieces as my purple potato. And now, like I said, I don't wanna waste these pieces. So out of these pieces, I'm gonna cut those same batons, although they're not perfect batons because they have a little bit of roundedness to them. And then I'm going to just turn them the other way once again. And now at home, if you're doing this and you're not an avid cutter, I would suggest instead of trying to go in and cut all of these potatoes at the same time, maybe separate it into a couple piles so you have more control over your knife and your movement. Remember, you are in control of your knife is not in control of you. Your knife should do what you want it to do, not the other way around. All right, let's add these in. But as you can see, I'm gonna come up closer now. My purple potatoes were nice and the same size. You can see these, they vary in size, which is gonna change the cooking. They're all gonna cook at different rates, which in the grand scheme of things is not like a huge deal. If you're cooking in a Michelin-starred restaurant and people are paying $1,000 for a potato, then obviously it is a huge deal because everything needs to be perfect. But at home, a hash is a very casual dish anyway, so if you want to work on your knife cuts, perfect opportunity too. But if you don't, then it's not a huge deal. Yes, questions?
So 2 questions. One from Damien Moe. When is the best time to season the potatoes?
Great question. That is my next thing I'm going to be doing as soon as these potatoes are all in the pot. Ideally, you'd maybe want to cut all of your potatoes and add them in at the same time. But this is real life. Like, I want to get things cooking. I want to get things done. So I'm just going to add things in as they're ready to go into the pan, one at a time. But as soon as all my potatoes are in, I'm definitely going to give them a nice heavy seasoning level. Ooh, I'm cutting rounded things on top of each other. That's not smart. Because you want to season in layers of flavor. All right.
One more question.
Yes.
From Monique Blonde. If the white potato is softer, does it cook faster than the sweet potato? Shouldn't we cut them a little bigger?
You can cut it. So basically a hash, you are going to, all the flavors are going to melt together and the textures are not quite as important as if like you were making a salad or something like that. So essentially the pan is going to cook the potatoes and they're going to get nice and crispy, but they're going to end up getting nice and mushy as we mix them all together. So yes, totally welcome to cut them in a bigger size, but I think that might be a little too fancy. It's easier if they're just all more similarly sized than usual. I have a whole big audience. I guess the football game must be over. Gil and Chris are now in the kitchen. All right, on to our onion. Oh, season, remember. I'm gonna season again with a generous pinch of salt over all my potatoes. Which actually probably 2. Potato holds a lot of starch, so. Or starchy, potatoes have a lot of starch, so. And I'm just gonna move them around. And now I'm gonna turn up my heat so they can start to get nice and crispy and brown.
Question about the knife. How often do you sharpen your knives? From Damien.
Great question about knife sharpening. How often you sharpen your knives is gonna depend on, I just am cutting off the top part, leaving that root end intact of our onion. I'm gonna cut it in half. How often you sharpen your knives definitely depends on how often you use your knives. If you're cooking every single day, your knife is gonna get a lot more dull than someone that is cooking maybe once a week or once or twice a week. You need to sharpen your knives when your knife is like hard to use. So if I were cutting, cutting the onion, actually this is a great example of when your knife is dull. If you have to saw your knife like way too hard into this onion, then your knife is dull. My knives actually probably could be sharpened. I'm lazy and I like to take them to get sharpened. My old job, Sur La Table, they actually sharpen knives for $5 a piece. Let someone else do the work. I'm just gonna cut horizontally through our onion. You guys have seen me do this a million times, or maybe 3, because I've only done this show like 4 times. And then I'm gonna turn it towards me. But you can see, if I was putting a lot of pressure, a lot of force into here, then my knife would need to be sharpened. And I brought this out because I want to show you. So many people think that if you use this steel, this is a knife steel, and you move your knife just like this, that's sharpening your knife. That's actually not sharpening your knife at all. And if your knife is dull and you're doing this, it's kind of like when you're filing your nails and you're using the more coarse side and the more fine side. You're not really doing anything except for making a dull knife a little more sharp. So not really the best thing to use. You should really invest in a knife sharpener, or like I said, you can take them to a store like my old job, Sur La Table, or even a great place to go or check for knife sharpening is like your local hardware store, probably like a mom or pop hardware store. All right, so we have our onion. Now I am gonna find my bench scraper. Where did I put it? Right in here. Also, this bench scraper you can't see from very far away. But if you're working on your knife cuts, there we go, working on your knife cuts, it has a little ruler, and every knife cut, the French knife cuts, has an actual specific size that it's supposed to be. So for example, a large dice is a 1/2 inch, a medium dice is a 1/4 of an inch, and a small dice is an 1/8 of an inch around. So having a little ruler nearby is very, very helpful, and having a ruler that's a bench scraper, multi-use tool, is even more helpful. In culinary school, we actually have legit rulers, like in our knife kits. All right, so we have our onions. I just added our onions. If you're just joining us, we're making a sweet potato hash with multicolored sweet potatoes. I just added in my onions, and I'm just gonna stir it around. Now, I don't want to stir too much because I do want to create that caramelization and color on my onions and sweet potatoes. But every now and then, just want to make sure it's not sticking to the pan. Yes?
Question from someone cooking along, Keith Price. Is avocado oil appropriate for potatoes?
Yes. You can use any kind of oil. Any kind of oil in this application. Avocado oil might have add a sort of different flavor, as would coconut oil. Those 2 oils I think have a strong flavor. I just use like a blend of olive oil, not like a super fancy expensive green olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, but just like a blend. That's typically what I tend to use when I'm just making something where I don't want a lot of flavor, but I do need a little oil in the pan. Alternatively, you could use butter, but butter burns a lot easier. And I guess that's the only reason I don't use butter. I'm just used to using the blend of olive oil. I think it's just easier. But butter does add more flavor, more fat, more flavor. So I have some celery here, and this is where we're gonna get fancy if you're cooking long, because we're gonna do a julienne into a brunoise knife cuts. We just practiced some medium and large dicing. So we're gonna cut our celery into a brunoise. And if you watched a couple weeks ago when I had that giant celery that was like as big as my head, this is that same celery. I still have it. It's still going strong. I just kept it in some water. I cut off the tops and kept it in some water, like some flowers. And it's still pretty crispy. It's not too bendy yet. And we're cooking it down anyway, so we'll still get that nice flavor without throwing away our celery. We're actually using something. I'm very proud of myself. Don't you feel very excited when you use something like, oh, it didn't go bad in my fridge?
Yeah, it's very efficient.
I'm just gonna cut off the tops and the bottoms there.
And we have a question from Damien Rowe. What's the basic set of knives I should buy for everyday cooking?
So, a basic...
Not a professional, it cooks 3 to 4 times a week.
The question was, so what I'm doing with my celery is I'm just cutting it into thin strips about 1/4 of an inch wide. I just modeled the wrong behavior, because what you should do is you never want to cut something that's as big as your knife. You should cut it into more manageable pieces, and then you can easily cut your strips. Again, brunoise, we're looking for 1/4 of an inch around, so I want these to be about 1/4 of an inch. Obviously, celery has that little rounded edge, so it's not going to be absolutely perfect, but that's what I'm looking for. So with your knife sets, there are 2 different kinds of knives in the world. There's Asian knives and German knives. There's some knives that are, and then now that I have my julienne, my nice little julienne, I'm going to just chop it into the smallest, tiniest brunoise. And notice I'm holding my hand and I'm rocking my knife up and down, and I'll show you how small this is. It's like super tiny, right? Looks really fancy, and it's really not that much effort to do, but it does add a nice fancy touch. When you're shopping for your knives, Asian knives and German knives are going to be more like this knife, a little heavier weighted. They have bigger blades, while Asian knives are a little thinner. Asian knives are a little more work to take care of because of the way their blades are made. And in general, I don't think that you need a giant knife kit for your house. Like, you know, those ones that everyone's mom probably has with like 8 steak knives and like a serrated knife and maybe 1 chef's knife, a paring knife. I don't think that's actually, you need that. If you're just cooking for yourself, or like you don't have a whole family where you're feeding everyone steak, that everyone needs a steak knife, I would suggest just buying a good chef's knife. An 8 or 9 inch chef knife, depending on what feels good to you. Something I personally like German knives better because I do like that weight in my hand. I played water polo and I swam, so I'm strong. I'm strong. The Asian knives are a little lighter, and I find the handles are a little harder for me to hold. I also have a pretty large hand to be a small, tiny woman. But that's just my personal preference. At a lot of kitchen stores, you can actually go, and they realize buying a knife is an investment. You can actually go and like try things out and chop potatoes, chop carrots at your fancier stores. So like I said, I don't have a brand because it is such a personal preference. It's like, what kind of shoes should I get? Nikes or Reeboks? What do you like? Not me. But you definitely need a chef's knife. You definitely need a paring knife, which is that small little knife, this one. Although I don't use that this much, but it's helpful for fruits or smaller things. As you get more comfortable chopping, your chef's knife is going to be your go-to thing basically all of the time. Like, I chop everything with this knife. You also need, which I don't have in my house, a serrated knife, which is the one with the edges. That's for like cutting breads, or as you saw when I did the shrimp, it's really helpful for cleaning out your shrimp as well. And it's multi-use tool. I hate tools that are only made for one use. They sell an actual shrimp cleaner, but how often are you cleaning shrimp to spend $9 on a tool that's just gonna collect dust in your kitchen most of the time? All right, so I added my celery in. I want to show you guys this. Celery's in there, potatoes are in there. I want to say carrots, but those are just sweet potatoes. We have regular potatoes, we have purple potatoes, and we have our just regular orange sweet potatoes in there. And you can't see this yet, but it's starting to get some great color on the bottom there. And it's starting to smell like amazing. So I'm just gonna keep watching this and keep stirring it every now and then. I'm gonna add just a little bit more salt because I added in those onions and that celery. Now, seasoning this other than salt. I told you guys to get smoked paprika and cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper, a little goes a long way. So I never suggest just shaking it from the thing unless you like to live on the danger side. You know how many times I've been like, oh, and then like I'm like trying to scoop out all the seasoning that I didn't mean to put in there. And smoked paprika. I really want to highlight this ingredient because smoked paprika is amazing especially if you're like a vegetarian and you're missing like that hearty flavor that sometimes meat gives you, that like sort of umami, smoky flavor in the background. Smoked paprika is like the best thing ever. It gives your dishes a little bit more heartier of a flavor. And we want to add this in with the oil because the oil is going to help bloom that paprika into our vegetables. And I know we're pairing it today with a steak, but this hash with just a fried egg on top would be amazing. Also, a lot of times hashes have a lot of football's on a break again because the guys are back out. A lot of times hashes have meat in them, like chopped up bacon or chopped up ham, which is delicious. But again, if you have multiple people that are feeding and you have vegetarians, just keep this one dish vegetarian, and then everyone that eats meat can eat the steak after.
What about, quick question, what
yes.
about regular paprika instead of smoked paprika?
So regular paprika will work. It just doesn't have that same, obviously, smoky flavor. So it's a little less hearty. It's a little less intense. Also, into this, you're gonna be like, this is so strange, but we're gonna zest like half of an orange. This is gonna really meld with that paprika flavor and the potatoes, and it's gonna just blend all of our full, delicious flavors together at the end on the plate. So just half of an orange. When you're zesting, I'm zesting with my microplane. Remember, one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. When you zest, you don't want to just rub your orange, because you know that little white stuff underneath, the pith, is very bitter and it doesn't taste very good. So you just want to just go once and then turn, once and turn, once and turn. And then all your little zest comes off, and I'm just going to knock it into the pan just like that a few times. Take out my aggression from my airline experience this morning. Hate American Airlines. All right, so I'm just going to stir this out.
The paprika and seasoning.
Yes,
should spices like curry and paprika be cooked in a little oil before adding to the dish?
Well, there's already oil in this dish, so it's blooming together already. Why dirty a whole nother pan when there's already oil in the pan? For some things, like if you're making if you are making a curry, you would do this step before you added any other liquid in. You would just your vegetables, your curry, because cooking it for a second, and we're going to be cooking this until all of our food is done. Cooking it is really going to intensify the flavor and help everything meld together. All right, so we're done with that now. We can just leave that. Oh, I didn't add any cayenne pepper. I'm going to add it at the end, very sparingly. So we're done with that. Let's talk about our steak. Yes, everyone's favorite part of the meal, at least my favorite part of the meal. Let's just clear off our area a little bit. So remember, our oven is at 425. For sure you want your oven on. I think a lot of times people make the mistake when they're cooking steak of trying to cook it on the stove the entire time. Let me tell you why that's not effective. It's not very effective because it's going to just dry out. The oven is going to provide like a nice, you know when you get in your car after it's really hot and it just feels like warm? That's the oven. That's how the oven is. As opposed to like walking on hot cement, only the bottom of your feet is getting hot. But when you get in that nice warm car, you're like, it feels amazing. That's the difference here. So we're going to actually start it on the stovetop at a really high. If you've watched this before, we know how to sear, right? What do we need for searing? I'm asking because I know you guys are all here and you can answer me out loud, right? What do we need for searing? We need a lot of heat. We need dry meat.
Everyone said steak.
We need a lot of heat. We need dry, little moisture, and that's pretty much all you need to sear. You need a super, super hot pan. If you have a cast iron pan, this would be a great place to pull it out. If not, a heavy bottom pan. This is my heaviest bottom pan I have here. So that's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to put it on the stove now while I'm continuing talking because I want the pan super, super hot.
Question from Keith Price. Should I add more oil if the hash is getting dry?
If the hash looks like it's getting dry, yes, you can add a little bit more oil, but just be careful, maybe like a teaspoon or so at a time. I added maybe about a tablespoon, and my hash doesn't look too dry yet. Not yet. It looks super good, right? All right. Oh, maybe if I move this, I should turn on the right burner. There we go. All right, so my pan is heating up for my steak back here. I want to season my steak. This is the other step. So super hot pan and seasoning steak. The only thing I'm going to season this steak with is salt, which might be surprising to you. A lot of people want to do salt or pepper. I noticed, question?
The burner.
Yeah. Oh, nope, burner went off. Thanks. That's why we paste up the big bucks. There we go. All right. All right, so we're just gonna season our steak. And again, steak and potato, I feel like everyone watches me and they're like, oh my gosh, you put so much salt on everything. But this is the biggest thing that home cooks do not do, is put enough salt. Like, it's the difference between taking something, mind you, filet mignon is very expensive. So we don't want to mess this up. I just spent $42 on this in Whole Foods. I almost was like, let's get a different cut because I don't feel like paying for that. But filet mignon is very expensive, and so we don't want to mess it up. So we really want to follow all the directions. Super hot pan, season with just salt. I'm not seasoning with pepper because pepper can burn sometimes. And why is filet mignon so expensive? It's not even necessarily everyone's favorite cut of meat, but it's a very lean cut, and it comes from a part of the animal that has like no use. It's not like its legs or its ribs or it's like walking around or pumping blood or anything like that. So it's super, super tender, super, super lean. In general, around America, on average, it costs about $18.99 per pound. I live in New York City, the most expensive city in America, and Whole Foods it was $34.99 a pound. But that's why we're gonna cook it properly and be very, very excited. So, filet mignon. And I also had a question earlier from one of my friends, Nikki, who's cooking along tonight as well. If you couldn't find filet, it's also sometimes called tenderloin. They can actually slice it. It comes like, so basically it's like a long piece of meat and it's all like that, all connected, and they slice it for you. If you can't find it, this recipe, this method of cooking steak works for any cut of steak. Salt, hot pan, finish in the oven, any kind of steak. If your preference is a ribeye, which has a little more marbling and fat, or New York strip steak, this works either with any kind of steak you can do this with. The only difference is the cook times will be slightly different because they're different sizes of steak. So let's see how hot our pan is. Seems pretty hot. You know how we test this? You can put some water, and if it jumps off and dances right away, then your pan is definitely hot enough. So again, I'm going to use a high heat oil, not an extra virgin olive oil. I'm going to use my blend of oil. Again, a lot of people like to cook their steak in butter, but if you're buying high quality steak, oil will help you don't need that extra fat of the butter, and it's more likely to burn. But I'm not opposed, it's just easier to cook it in oil. All right, so I'm gonna add in a good amount of oil. I want the oil to basically coat the bottom of the pan, especially for something like a filet mignon, which does not have a lot of fat inside of it. So you don't have to feel bad about putting oil in the pan because there's not really too much fat in here at all. Now once our pan is hot and it looks shimmering, I always used to say it looks shimmering like the ocean when I worked on the ship. That's how you know that your oil is hot enough. Now we're going to put our fillets. We're going to think about this. We're going to put our fillets in the pan, and then we're not going to touch them for like 4 minutes. And we're going to time this. Question?
2 questions. One for Nikki. Is Evoy okay to use too?
Evoy? Extra virgin olive oil?
Yes, Evoy.
I'm assuming, so I don't suggest for high heat using extra virgin olive oil, because extra virgin olive oil is the highest quality of olive oil, and it's a live living thing. So if you bring it up really high, it kills all that flavor. It's normally also more expensive than your regular blend of oil anyway. So I would stay away from using it for super high heat things.
And so, what is the ideal high heat oil for steak?
High heat oil? Oh, the ideal, any high heat oil. Grapeseed oil is really great. A blend of olive oil is great. What else is good? Coconut oil is good, but again, I said coconut oil can sometimes skew the flavor of things. I use coconut oil when I'm making steak a lot, when I'm doing like Asian-inspired dishes, like if I'm doing beef and broccoli. I don't know why I can't think of any other Asian dishes I do right now, but yeah, I do coconut oil a lot for those sort of dishes. So we have our steak here in the back, searing away, and as I said, so we want it dry, no moisture on it. We want super high heat in our pan, and we don't want to touch it. We always are tempted as soon as we put something in the pan to like, what's happening under there? We don't want to do that because our flavor is going to be created by the caramelization that is happening as the sugars in the meat are reacting to the heat. It's called the Maillard reaction. And as that's happening, it only happens when you don't touch it. So just like hang out, talk to your friends, don't walk too far away because we don't want to overcook our filet. We've been cooking for about a minute now. The other, and I hesitate to say this, but if you feel like you need to be doing something, you can move your pan around, not the steak. If you feel like you need to do something, move your pan, not the steak. Also note, question?
Is peanut oil okay?
Peanut oil is fine. fine. It's a high heat oil. A lot of times chefs don't use peanut oil because of allergies. You never know. And it's like this dangerous thing lurking in the background of flavor. I'm going to just go ahead and stir my hash back here, which is getting some nice color and smelling even more amazing. I also want to taste it at this point, see what's happening here. It's so important to taste your food as you go because you can fix it as you go along as opposed to getting to the very end and being like, oh, this tastes horrible and I have no idea how to fix it. If you taste it along the way, you're in charge. Hot. So hot. But it's good. You can taste the sweetness of the potatoes. The paprika kind of balances out that sweetness of the sweet potatoes. The sweet potatoes are too sweet for you, which is another reason we added a regular potato inside as well. Those onions are starting to caramelize and get nice and sweet. You know how onions do as well. I'm seeing if I can taste that orange. I feel like it can add a little bit more orange zest just so it comes through just a little bit more for brightness. All right, how long have we been cooking? Maybe 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
3 minutes or so. So, if you're doing fillets in a cast iron skillet, it's amazing. Cast iron skillet is great because you can do it right in the pan, flip them over, and then put them in your oven to finish off. Unfortunately, my pan cannot go inside the oven, although there is a version of a Scam Pan that can. Scam Pan can. I'm just rhyming along today. But not this one. So I'm going to actually transfer my steaks to a baking sheet that I have some aluminum foil on, only to make my life easier later when I want to clean up. And then I'm going to put them in our oven to finish them off. Now, here's where timing is really important. 4 minutes on one side, then I'm going to take them out. Oh my gosh, this is like perfection. Perfection! Look at this. Let's also turn this off so we don't die. This is exactly, as I was standing here running my mouth to you, this is exactly the colorization that we wanted to get on our steaks. And you see that the inside is still pretty rare. Woo, woo, woo. Don't want to drop them on the floor.
Sweet baby Jesus.
Sweet baby. All right, into the oven. Depending on how you want your steaks cooked is how long we're gonna put them in. Group consensus, how do you want our steak cooked?
Medium.
You guys are so
Rare.
I like medium rare.
Yes, me
which
too.
would be obviously the least amount of time that we're gonna put them in. 5 to 6 minutes for medium rare. 6 to 7 for 5 to 6 minutes for rare. 6 to 7 for medium rare, and 7 to 8 for medium. Anything above that, I don't know you. I can't tell you. I can't instruct you because don't eat meat if you need it well done. It's just not. It's just, especially this. It's so tender and juicy and amazing. Yeah. 8 minutes is the longest you can put them in here. I'm gonna put them in for about.
What about medium?
6 minutes. Medium well.
You don't recommend?
No.
I don't recommend anything above medium for steak. But, yeah, no. Let's just not talk about that. I don't want to offend anyone. All right, into the oven they go. I'm going to take them out at 7:42 because this is not going to, they're not going to be done. The other important thing when you're cooking steak is you want the steak to rest. This allows all the juices to recirculate and it makes it nice and juicy. Also, if you care about presentation, you want your steak to rest so then you can slice it and there's not blood all over. It'll stay inside the meat and be nice and juicy. All right, what do we have left to do? Finish up our hash. Our hash tastes pretty good. I'm gonna get this oil out of the way so I don't hurt myself. I'm going to start my gastrique. Not spelled like gastric stomach cancer like I did on my Instagram. Sorry about that again. A gastrique is a caramelized sugar deglazed with vinegar. It's a type of sauce. It's kind of, what's happening over there, everyone? It's a kind of sauce that's like a maple syrup. We want a thickness of a maple syrup. So basically what we're gonna put into our saucepan, everyone should have a saucepan this size. It's a great, great pan. We're going to put in some cranberry juice and some beef broth. Question.
Top shelf or bottom of in the oven, does it matter?
Ideally in the middle of your oven, depending on where you want to put your steak. Ideally in the middle. If you put it, but for instance, I didn't cook my steaks on the bottom of them, so I put them on the bottom rack, so that heat from the bottom is hitting that steak on the top. So into my pan for my cranberry gastrique, I'm putting some cranberry juice, but I realized I've never tasted this before, so I should taste it to see how it tastes so I know what I'm putting in. Oh my gosh, it's so sour. This is really Whole Foods cranberry juice. No sugar added. So that means we need to add more sugar.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world, but we're gonna add more sugar than we normally would if I was using like ocean spray cranberry. All right, question?
No, it's okay. We're covered.
I'm also gonna add in some beef broth. I have chicken broth, but either works. Beef broth is gonna make it a little deeper in flavor than chicken broth. And then we're going to add in some brown sugar. Again, more than I normally would if I was using a sweeter cranberry juice, but you guys just saw my face when I tasted that. So I definitely want to add in a lot of sugar.
How long to cook a thinner tenderloin? And is there a rule of thumb for cook time based on the thickness of the steak?
In general, if you're getting true tenderloins that are cut the right way, which you're gonna only get at like a high quality butcher, somewhere like Whole Foods or a Cinderella or a real butcher. A lot of times in the grocery stores, I noticed at the one by my house, Besiat, they make all their steaks like super thin. If your steak, I don't know how big those were. They were like about an inch or so. If your steak is like half an inch, you're probably only gonna put it in the oven for like 2 minutes. But honestly, I can't tell you like an exact rule of thumb because all of the steaks are always gonna vary. But what I will show you is when I take it out of the oven, some visual cues to look for, depending on how you want your steak done. But yes, it is a kind of a guess and check method. I know, sorry, the steak is expensive. But in general, if you can, just try to buy steaks that are about an inch because most rules of thumb are for filet mignons that are about an inch thick or so. All right, so I just started my cranberry gastrique on the stove. I have some beef broth, cranberry juice, and sugar reducing on the stove. Reducing is a big fancy kitchen term. Oh, let me stir this. Sounds like a flat happening right here. Reducing is a fancy kitchen term that means condensing flavor by evaporation. So essentially, this is gonna boil and come to a boil, and as all the steam evaporates, the flavors are gonna get concentrated and much more delicious. Also, because we added sugar in here, a gastrique is more of a sticky sort of sauce. The sugar is going to reduce and make the sauce a lot thicker. In general, though, if we didn't have sugar, as you reduce something down, it should get like a viscosity that's a little more thick in general. All right, so we have our hash going. It looks beautiful. This is like perfect colors happening in here. But we have one more thing to add to our hash because we can't just eat steak and potatoes. We always need a green vegetable. Thanks, Mom, right? Can't just eat steak and potatoes. I have some dinosaur kale. It's a little bit different than its friend, the curly kale. I like it good. I like it for these sorts of applications because it holds its structure a little bit better. And we're gonna be basically blanching it and then chopping it up to put into our hash. So we're making a nice colorful hash with vegetables in it. Awesome, right? So I'm just gonna rinse it off. You can also, sometimes it's named Tuscan kale at the grocery store. And it's also named Lasiento. Have you ever seen that? L-A-C, no. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing things right. But it's also sometimes labeled with the L, Lasiento. L-A-N-C-I-T-O. Never heard of it? I call it dinosaur kale because I find like it's fun. I feel like that's a fun name.
I've seen dinosaur kale.
So what do we have in the back? Oh, you guys are not our steaks. We gotta check on our steaks.
Just in time.
Just in time. All right. Before I talk about my kale more, here are our steaks. So, best way to tell if your steak is done, thermometer. The best way, honestly. You're gonna stick it in, not from the top because we cooked it on the top. You're gonna stick it into the side. And I feel like my oven might not be that hot because this steak right here, this one is obviously a little bit bigger than this one. It's only temping at 94 degrees. I'm gonna stick this one in. And this one is temping at a lot hotter. So see what I mean? I have two steaks. I bought them from the same exact place. This one is almost at temp. It needs another minute or so. It's at 133. And this one is very far from being at temperature because it's so much bigger. Yeah, it's only at 91. So I'm gonna put them back in the oven. But as promised, I told you some other visual cues for knowing when your steak is done. Take your finger and press on it. If you press on it and it gives, that means that it's still pretty rare. If you press on it and see how bouncy it is, it's like a trampoline bouncing on my finger, or I'm bouncing on the steak. If it makes an indentation, then it's very, very rare. So, whereas as you can see on this steak, that's a little bit, this one's almost done. If I touch it towards the edge, it's pretty firm. So that means it's getting closer to being done. Question?
I haven't used the cranberries yet, right?
No, I haven't used the dried cranberries yet. We just used the cranberry juice. If you're just joining us, we're making filet mignon with sweet potato hash and cranberry gastrique. I'm gonna throw my steaks back in the oven. Again, this is real life. We can say all the rules and stuff we want. I gave you a whole list of how long we should cook these, but sometimes your oven might not be hot enough, or your steaks might be different sizes. So you really have to use, you know, cooking is active. You gotta do it, you gotta check. So I'm gonna put these in for another 2 minutes, actually probably 3. That big one is probably gonna end up being cooking for another like 5 or 6 minutes, I would assume. But we're gonna make sure that we check on it. So keep that in mind, people back there. People in the peanut gallery.
Yeah, oven's on.
The oven's on. Yes, the oven is on. All right, so kale or a hash. Like I said, we're not making potatoes and meat only. We're gonna be healthy. We're going to just dip. This is how I blanch my kale. I literally just dip it in, because I'm not gonna use any of these parts. I'm gonna dip it in, pull it out, and then just chop it up. And I rinse it off so there's not too much dirt on it, and any more dirt will just fall off in the hot boiling water. The only thing I want to do before I finish before I blanch this is add some salt to my water. Yes, question.
Monique asks, how much maple syrup do I use for the fancy sauce? I don't have brown sugar.
For the gastrique, you want to use about half the amount of liquid and sugar because we're reducing it down and we want it to end up being like a syrup. Let's turn off this water. All right. You see I have my kale that I just blanched. So if you used about a half a cup of cranberry juice and beef stock, then you want to use about a half a cup of maple syrup, and it'll reduce down and get thicker. So you can see blanching my kale is super easy. Just dip it in, dip it out. These parts are actually good to save and use maybe in a smoothie. I find that they're a little too, especially for this application where I'm making a hash, they're a little too textured and people end up chewing on them a lot. So I'm just really gonna focus on these leafy greens. Another tip when you're buying this kind of kale is to try to buy leaves, now that I've blanched it, try to buy leaves that are like very tender and they don't have giant stems like this in the middle, because these, again, the stems are kind of not as applicable. So cut that off, and now all I'm gonna do, save that for a smoothie, all I'm gonna do is run my knife through the kale so I make little ribbons. This is super hot. You might want to rinse it off under some water first if you don't have hands of steel. I'm just gonna chop it. Remember, when we're chopping, we're just rocking our knife back and forth, just like this. And then, I might not need all of this, but now I have some nice blanched kale if I want to throw it in an omelet tomorrow. I feel on top of it I have eggs, I have breakfast tomorrow. So at this point, I'm gonna use my discretion, right? So here's my hash I have going. And I'm gonna see, I probably shouldn't put this down, straight down on there. I'm gonna just mix it in and see what looks good to me. I don't want the hash to be overtaken by the kale. I guess you guys can't see, oh there you go. I don't want the hash to be overtaken by the kale, but I do want it to be something, not just like an afterthought, like parsley on a dish or something. All right, this looks amazing. All right, so I'm going to let Stephanie taste it, see how she feels about it. Because since we added in that kale and it's not very seasoned, we might need to do one last layer of seasoning. Put this back on the stove. Put this kale in a little cup for tomorrow. How do we feel about that hash over there?
This is good.
Stephanie approves. She's glad that she's here for dinner. All right, I'm gonna check my steaks again, of course. Ooh. All right. So.
Wasn't quite 5 minutes.
Wasn't quite. So this one's probably. They're actually looking pretty good now. This one I think is done. But how do we know for sure? We stick our thermometer inside. I'm using a Thermopen thermometer, which quickly and instantly reads very easily. All right, I'm gonna check this one from this side. Yeah, this one came up to 117, but it's not quite done. I'm going to stop cooking the smaller one. That can be the one for the rare people like me, and I'll cook the other one a little more. Remember, another important step, you never, ever, ever, even though I do sometimes because life happens, you never want to cut right into a steak that you just took out of the oven. All the juices are going to go everywhere. It's going to end up dry. It's just not as good. Back into the oven that goes. See how our gastrique is doing back here. It's bubbling away. Bubbling, bubbling. And as it bubbles away,
Chefleen,
yes, question.
what degrees do you want your steak to be?
What degrees? Oh, so if you are cooking a steak that is well done, then you're looking for 155, which I don't know why you'd ever cook it for that. About 130 is rare, and anywhere in between there is your medium, your well, your medium well, medium rare. But 130 is rare, and 155 would be done. So all in between those. I'm gonna add in my dried cranberries to our gastrique back here. What this is gonna do, adding our dried cranberries into this gastrique, is it's gonna plump them up and make them like delicious and great, nice, and it's gonna give our gastrique, which is typically just a sauce, a glaze, it's gonna give it a lot more texture. So the final thing that we need to do while our steaks are finishing cooking and our gastrique is done, and this was totally optional, but because I love fatness and cheese, we're gonna make a blue cheese butter to go on top of our steak. Yes. How's that sound? It's so simple. This is also known as a compound butter. Basically, butter with anything mixed inside of it is a compound butter. You can make a big batch of this and then like freeze little pieces of it. You can make a batch of it and then roll it in some plastic wrap and cut off little dime pieces of it. All right, but all we're literally gonna do is mix butter and blue cheese together and then rub it all over our bodies and enjoy. Just kidding, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna melt it on top of our steak when it's done. All right, blue cheese, butter. Oh, you know what else we should add in here? And obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I had my butter out at room temperature, so it's nice and softened. And this was totally optional on the list of ingredients if you're cooking along and you didn't have this. It's not the end of the world because I definitely said optional. I know blue cheese is something that a lot of people are adverse to. Has a very strong flavor, so not everyone is their favorite thing. I used to really hate it because my mom ate blue cheese salad dressing when I was a kid. It was disgusting. But now I love it. I can't get enough. I'm gonna add some lemon zest just to brighten this up. And actually even some lemon juice. Because this is a lot of fat in here going on in here. So we want to brighten it up. We want to make it more acidic. All right. Do I dare taste this? Tastes like butter and blue cheese. Tastes delicious. All right, our gastrique is back here bubbling away. I did say that a gastrique is a sugar-reduced sauce, but also has vinegar in it. So at this point, I want to add just a little bit of vinegar. A gastrique is really going to be like a sweet and sour, savory sauce. It pairs really well with things like red meats, where you don't really want to lose the focus of flavor on your meat, but you want just a little bit of sauce. Yes, question?
Just letting you know at 7:51.
Oh, I thank you. We have about 10 minutes to finish up, and guess what? We're basically almost done. We've cooked almost a whole real meal in less than an hour. I just want to show you what's happening with this steak here. Can't see? You see how this blood has come off of there? So if I had just chopped into this as soon as I took it off, all that would be all over my plate. So it's really important to rest any kind of meat that you're making. You want to rest it. And a lot of times I get the question, so what happens, not what happens, my steak is going to be cold after. You can always just flash it in the oven right before serving again, and then it can be hot again. But it really is important to rest your meat. So let's go over the most important things that we learned today, making our filet mignon. When we are searing, we need super hot pan. Just salt is all you need, and you want to dry off any moisture. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you are making more than 2 steaks in a pan, you don't want to overcrowd your pan, because if you're overcrowding your pan, you're creating moisture, which doesn't allow you to get this nice crispy sear on it. We use a high heat oil. You can use butter, you can use grapeseed oil, you can use a blend of olive oil. You want to stay away from extra virgin olive oil, because that's gonna, and it's just stay away from it. Just letting you know, just don't use it for high heat applications. Question? Check the steak. Let's pull out our other steak. We also went over steak time cooking, but we also learned that not all steaks are created equal, right? So this steak was a lot bigger than that steak, so in which case this one has been cooking a little bit longer. Best way to tell your steak is done, you want to use your thermometer. This is at a perfect 134. This is probably about a medium well. Also, as your steak cooks and rests, it's actually going to continue to cook just a little bit more. I'm going to take it off the heat so it doesn't overcook. If I left it on this hot pan, it'll continue to cook even more so.
And how long should you let it rest?
You want to let your steak rest up to 30 minutes. These are smaller pieces of steak, so they don't need to rest as long. But if you have like a giant porterhouse or ribeye, 30 minutes actually for all those juices to really recirculate and get back inside. But now it is time for us to plate our food. Aren't we excited for this moment? I know I am. All right. Everyone's excited here to eat. So we're gonna put our hash on the bottom, just right there. Remember to eat with your eyes first. So you just made expensive steak. You wanna make sure that you're doing a good job of plating it and it looks appetizing to your eyes.
How thick should the cranberry sauce be?
The cranberry sauce, we're looking for a consistency of like maple syrup or honey. But we added in all that extra. So if you were using, I use brown sugar, but if you're using a syrup, you just want it to get nice and thick, which that's not quite there yet. But let's taste it. It's like super hot. It might need more sugar. That cranberry juice from Whole Foods with no sugar added, don't recommend it. Maybe in a smoothie. Actually, this tastes pretty good though. It has that nice sweet and tart flavor going on for us. So I'm just gonna let that reduce down just a little bit more. Now at this point, this is where your reduction could go from perfect to like away and like burnt. So at this point you don't wanna leave. You don't want it to over reduce. But if it does over reduce and it starts burning your pan, if it burns, you have to throw it out. It's not gonna taste good. But if it over reduces, you can always add just a little bit more liquid, and the more liquid will kind of bring it back to life. All right. Now let's choose our steak. You know at restaurants they just like sit it right there, but we're gonna be fancy and slice our steak. So when you slice your steak, you notice the grains run a certain way. You wanna go against the grain. That's also gonna help create a more tender experience. And then, oh, this looks so beautiful. Just gonna slice it as thin as possible. I don't know how much I should charge these people for a plate tonight. This will be a $50 plate, everyone. I hope you brought cash.
Free 99.
All right, I'm gonna just stack these pieces on just like that. Oh my gosh, beautiful. And then I'm gonna put a dollop of our blue cheese butter on top, and it's just gonna melt over everything. This combination of flavors, when you put this in your mouth, you're welcome. You're welcome. This is gonna be so good. Let me just rinse off this blue cheese butter. If you guys weren't watching me, I'd probably just lick my fingers, but you know, keep it professional. And now, finally, we just want to put our gastrique with our cranberries around the plate. This could be a little bit thicker, but I don't want to hold your Sunday night captive. I know there's another football game coming on soon. Yes. I need to hire Gil to be my soundtrack in the back all the time. Yes. And we just have a little bit of cranberry juice on the side, so I just want to wipe that up. But here we have our perfect fall meal with all those beautiful knife cuts. Our filet mignon with sweet potato hash, blue cheese butter melting over it. Look at that steak. That is seriously perfection. I need to go so I can start eating this. Our sweet potato hash with our kale mix-in, so we're still eating vegetables. And we made this from start to finish in almost an hour. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you next week. I'm very excited. This is so fun. Let me know what you want to see. Let me know what you want to hear. I combined all of the votes from last week into this meal. And if you make something, tag me. Let me know how it turns out. Thanks, guys. See you guys later.
Yay.
How do I turn this off? Oh, and every week. And live video.
Yeah.